Inside the plush suite on the 15th floor of the Azalea Hotel in downtown Ouagadougou, Richard Thornton, West Africa Operations Director for Global Gold, stared at his phone in stunned silence. The message he just received could jeopardize the company's $2.7 billion stake in Burkina Faso. It included only a video link and a short note: tomorrow, 2 p.m., Presidential Palace. It would be in your best interest to attend. When Thornton tapped the video link, the screen filled with the image of Ibrahim Traoré dressed in military attire. The young leader looked directly into the camera, his voice composed but firm. "Mr. Thornton, we have concluded a thorough investigation into your company's conduct on Burkina land. What we found points to systematic exploitation of our national resources. Either you come forward to negotiate a just agreement or your leadership team will face justice in Burkina Faso's courts." The footage continued, shifting to scenes of the Esaken gold mine. Massive machines tore into the red earth, while nearby, villagers stood beside a barren, cracked pond. Traoré's voice carried on: "Your firm extracts $1.2 billion worth of gold each year, yet pays just $124 million into the national treasury. This is colonialism in disguise, and it ends today." Thornton stopped the video and stepped to the window. The city lights of Ouagadougou twinkled beneath the night sky. He grabbed his phone again and called headquarters in London. "Marcus, we have a serious issue. Traoré's gone further than we expected. He's clearly accessed our internal files and is demanding a meeting tomorrow. Otherwise, he's threatening legal action against our leadership." Across the ocean, Global Gold CEO Marcus Reynolds had been woken up by the call. He answered, voice tense with disbelief and fury. "This is outrageous. He's threatening us. What power does a country like Burkina Faso really have? Call the State Department. This cannot stand." Thornton exhaled slowly. "Marcus, this time it's different. Traoré has proof documents. He knows everything. The safety breaches, the unreported incidents, the bribery, all of it." There was a long pause on the line. "I'll be there tomorrow," Reynolds finally said. "Get a plane ready." The Presidential Palace's official meeting room was refined, a seamless blend of traditional African motifs and modern design. The walls were lined with Burkina Faso's flags and portraits of the nation's founding heroes. Ibrahim Traoré had traded his military outfit for a tailored navy suit. Around the table sat the Ministers of Economy and Justice, along with 5 legal advisors. At exactly 2 p.m., the Global Gold team entered. Marcus Reynolds led the group, followed by Richard Thornton and 3 company attorneys. Now in his 60s, Reynolds, with silver hair and a confident stride, attempted a polite smile, but the strain on his face was unmistakable. "President Traoré, thank you for hosting us. At Global Gold, we believe we've enjoyed a long-standing and fruitful partnership with Burkina Faso," said Reynolds, extending his hand. Traoré shook it, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Reynolds, welcome to Burkina Faso. I only wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Please take a seat." Once everyone had settled, one of Traoré's aides activated a large screen. It displayed detailed financial statements from Global Gold spanning 5 years, including mine output, actual profit margins, and revenue from their Burkina Faso operations. These internal figures starkly contradicted the company's public disclosures. "As you can see, gentlemen," said Traoré, "we have obtained quite comprehensive insights into your company's operations. You might be curious how we access such documentation. Let's just say we too have allies in the international financial community." Reynolds tapped the table with his fingers. "President Traoré, if our private corporate records were obtained through unauthorized means, that would be a serious breach of international law." Traoré remained composed. "Mr. Reynolds, if we're discussing illegality, there's a lot on the table." The screen shifted again. Now it revealed internal email threads detailing ignored safety issues at the Esaken mine, documents referencing 3 fatal accidents that had been quietly concealed, and evidence of bribes paid to local authorities. One document recounted a 2019 cyanide spill that contaminated the water supply of 3 villages never disclosed by the company. Another showed that in 2021, Global Gold had forcefully displaced 340 families to expand mining operations, offering only 30% of the promised compensation. Lastly, the company's tax filings appeared to misalign significantly with actual revenue. Reynolds' face flushed red. The lawyer seated next to him leaned in to whisper, but Reynolds raised a hand to silence him. President Traoré, in any major operation, setbacks can occur. We're actively working to address them. But trying to corner us with threats and intimidation, that's not how professional business is done. Traoré leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Intimidation? That's an interesting word coming from a corporation that siphons 90% of the profits from our resources while leaving our people impoverished. Don't you find that ironic? Thornton attempted to steer the discussion. President Traoré, we are ready to collaborate. Perhaps we can review and improve our existing agreements. A review won't be sufficient, Traoré replied firmly. We're seeking a complete renegotiation, one that is just. The people of Burkina Faso deserve their rightful share of the gold extracted from their land. Reynolds rose sharply, voice rising with frustration. This is extortion. Our company has invested billions into Burkina Faso. We accepted the risks, built your infrastructure, and now you're discarding the deals we signed? I wonder what our contacts in London and allies in Paris would make of this. Traoré stayed composed. Mr. Reynolds, if you're trying to intimidate us, you should remember it's 2025. The era of colonial control is over. African nations are charting their own course now. As for your friends in Paris and London, they have their own crises to deal with these days. He slid a folder across the table. This is our new proposal. 50% of all profits will go directly to the Burkina Faso treasury. You will raise local hiring to 80%, create an environmental restoration fund, and fully compensate all displaced families, Traoré continued. Reynolds shoved the folder aside, without even glancing at it. This is unworkable. No mining company can operate profitably under such conditions. Traoré calmly shook his head. Mr. Reynolds, we've reviewed your actual earnings. Even with these adjustments, your company would still clear $400 million annually. Isn't that enough? Reynolds stood abruptly. This discussion is over. From now on, we'll handle this through diplomatic channels. Traoré also rose but motioned subtly toward the door. Two uniformed military officers stepped into the room. Mr. Reynolds, you're free to leave, Traoré said evenly. However, Mr. Thornton and your operations director, Pierre Leclerc, will remain. We've launched an official investigation involving charges of bribery, environmental violations, and tax fraud. Reynolds turned, stunned. What? This is an international incident. You can't just we can, Traoré interrupted, holding up a document. This is a valid arrest warrant signed by the Supreme Court of Burkina Faso. It is fully within our legal rights. Mr. Thornton and Mr. Leclerc will stay here. You have 72 hours to formally respond to our proposal. Thornton's face went ghostly. Marcus, you can't just leave me here. Reynolds glanced around in disbelief. Even his attorney looked shaken. This is a hostage situation, Reynolds muttered. I'm contacting the U.S. Embassy. Traoré gave a small shrug. Feel free. But remember, we'll have to share our findings with them as well. I wonder what the U.S. Department of Justice will say about your company under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. A thick silence settled over the room. Reynolds looked at Thornton, then back at Traoré. Give me 48 hours. I'll review the proposal. Very well, Traoré said. Mr. Thornton and Mr. Leclerc will be treated respectfully. Don't worry, our detention centers are not as unpleasant as you may imagine. At least, not yet. That same evening, an emergency board meeting took place at Global Gold's headquarters in London. CEO Marcus Reynolds addressed the room via video call. This is a full-blown crisis, said the company's chief legal officer. If the documents Traoré holds are legitimate, we're facing not just legal risk in Burkina Faso, but potentially in the U.S. and the U.K. as well. The financial director cut in. His terms are impossible. Surrendering 50% of our profits would crash our stock and devastate investor confidence. The board won't survive it. Reynolds, his expression tight on the screen, replied, and what options do we have? Richard and Pierre are already in custody. If any of those documents leak, our international reputation will collapse. Don't forget 40% of our African gold holdings are in Burkina Faso. An older board member finally spoke. Maybe we need to take a step back. Africa is evolving. The agreements we've relied on for decades may no longer hold. This could be the moment we reevaluate our entire strategy on the continent. What about the competition? Asked another. If we withdraw, the Chinese or Russians will be in tomorrow. Reynolds sat quietly for a moment thinking, maybe the answer isn't in resistance. Maybe the answer is in something else. What exactly are trows everyone has? A pressure point even leaders, said the company's Africa analyst. But this situation feels different. Trao isn't your typical strongman. Yes, he's from the military, but he also holds a degree in engineering. He actually seems committed to improving his country. And his popularity among the people is real. What about diplomacy? Someone asked. Can France still push back? Not like before, came the reply. France's sway in the Sahel is shrinking fast. Plus, Traoré has taken a clearly anti-French stance. Reynolds exhaled slowly. That leaves us with two roads. Either we accept his demands and try building a new kind of relationship, or we resist with every diplomatic, legal, and economic tool we've got. The board was split. Some directors urged confrontation, clinging to precedent. Others argued the world had changed and so must they. As the tense debate wore on, Aisha Menza, Africa bureau chief at the Financial Times in London, received an unexpected email. Attached were hundreds of internal documents revealing Global Gold's dealings in Burkina Faso. By morning, a media firestorm had erupted. The global press was ablaze with headlines like mining giant implicated in massive corruption and ecological disaster in Burkina Faso. The Financial Times, New York Times, and El Iman all carried the story on their front pages. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #GiveBackAfrica's Gold and #GlobalGoldShame began trending globally. On the London Stock Exchange, Global Gold shares plummeted by 17% within hours. Soon, the fallout spread beyond Burkina Faso. Ghana's government announced it would re-examine its mining agreements. In Mali, civil society groups launched street protests. Back in a guarded guest house in Ouagadougou, Richard Thornton sat in silence, hands covering his face as he watched the crisis unfold on television. His accommodation wasn't harsh, it was clean, modest, even comfortable, but the presence of armed guards outside his door reminded him he wasn't free. That afternoon, Traoré arrived in person, dressed once again in his military fatigues. He looked composed and firm. "Mr. Thornton," he said, "how are you? I hope they've made your stay tolerable." Thornton gave a faint, grim smile. "Why are you here, President Traoré? To break me?" Traoré took the seat across from him and replied calmly, "No, Mr. Thornton. I'm here to show you something." He pulled out his phone and tapped on a video. It began with an elderly man from a village near the Esakan mine. He spoke about the time before the mine, clean drinking water, green farmland, and healthy children. Then the footage shifted, a cracked riverbed, wilted fields, and children with sunken eyes. "These people," Traoré said softly, "they are my responsibility. I answer to them." "Who do you answer to, Mr. Thornton? Shareholders in London? Hedge fund managers in New York?" Thornton swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the screen. In all his years at the mine, he had never stopped to think about the villagers' lives. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "The truth," said Traoré. "Tell us the real numbers, what your company truly earns, how little it contributes in taxes, and how it's violated environmental laws." "You want me to turn on my company? Become a whistleblower?" "No," Traoré said, steady and unwavering. "I'm giving you a choice. Either testify or face charges for corruption, bribery, and ecological destruction. Your signature appears on several of these documents," Traoré said quietly. Thornton sat in silence, reflecting deeply. Throughout his long career, he had always comforted himself with the phrase, "I was just following orders." But today, that excuse no longer held weight. "Give me time," he finally murmured. Traoré gave a single nod. "You have until tomorrow." Meanwhile, back in London, the situation at Global Gold's headquarters was spiraling. Panic filled the halls. The company had issued an urgent press statement to investors, calling the accusations completely unfounded. But the volume and specificity of the leaked files made denial increasingly implausible. To make matters worse, Nova Minerals, Global Gold's fiercest competitor, had reached out directly to the Burkina government, expressing support for a new model based on fair mining practices. A Chinese state-owned mining conglomerate had also entered negotiations, signaling strong interest. In his office, Reynolds was on a heated call with a U.S. State Department official. "This is a hostage situation. 2 American citizens are being held and you're doing nothing. The voice on the other end remained firm. Mr. Reynolds, based on our intelligence, these arrests are lawful under Burkina Faso's jurisdiction. Moreover, the claims made against your company are serious. The Department of Justice has now launched its own inquiry. Reynolds slammed the receiver down. Just then, his assistant stepped into the room. Sir, the board is convening an emergency session. Also, Pierre Leclerc's wife is downstairs. She wants to speak with you. Reynolds looked up, eyes red-rimmed and weary. God, what can I possibly say to her? In Ouagadougou, at the presidential palace, President Traoré was deep in strategy discussions with his cabinet. Global gold is in a vulnerable state, the Minister of Economy reported. Their stock price is tumbling. They're under fire both publicly and legally. Still, we must be cautious. If we push too hard, we might scare off future investors. Traoré tapped a finger against the table, thinking, our goal is not to frighten. It's to reset the terms. We want honest deals. If Global Gold agrees, it could become a model for future negotiations. And if they reject it, asked one advisor, then we proceed with Nova Minerals, Traoré said without hesitation. Or even the Chinese group. The mines will operate either way. This time, however, we set the rules. The foreign minister added, France is applying diplomatic pressure but support is rising across West Africa. Mali, Niger and Ghana are considering similar actions. Traoré gave a slow, satisfied smile. That's crucial. Alone, we'd struggle. But if we stand united, no one will be able to overlook us. By the third day, the entire world was watching Ouagadougou closely. Global media tracked every update as it happened. Marcus Reynolds had flown back to Burkina Faso, this time not alone. At his side was Sir James Goldsmith, the company's founding figure and its largest stakeholder. He was in his 80s now, white-haired and sharp-eyed, one of the last great titans of the mining world. Inside the palace's negotiation room, tension hung in the air. On one side sat Traoré and his ministers, on the other, the top brass of Global Gold. Sir James spoke first, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. We've gone through your proposal, he said, and while some parts are difficult, these terms are difficult, Sir Goldsmith admitted, but we're prepared to propose a compromise. Traoré didn't react. Our offer is 40% of total profits, more than triple the current 12%. We'll raise local employment levels to 70% and allocate $200 million for environmental recovery. Traoré shook his head firmly. That won't suffice. We demand 50% of the profits, 80% local workforce participation, and a $500 million environmental fund. Reynolds immediately objected. That's out of the question. How can we possibly explain this to our investors? Sir Goldsmith held up his hand. Marcus, let's stay calm. He turned to Traoré. Young man, I've spent 6 decades in this industry. I've launched mines all across the continent. I understand how these deals work. Maybe, Traoré replied evenly, that's exactly the problem. 60 years ago, African nations were just gaining independence. Leaders were inexperienced. They signed agreements that favored foreign corporations. But it's 2025 now. This is a new Africa. The room grew tense. Sir Goldsmith sat quietly for a moment, then locked eyes with the president. How about a compromise? He said at last. 45% of the profits, 75% local employment, and a $400 million environmental fund. And to show our commitment, Global Gold will give Burkina Faso a 10% equity stake in the company. Traoré looked toward his ministers. The Minister of Economy gave a subtle nod. One more thing, Traoré added. We intend to create Burkina Faso's first national mining company. We expect support in transferring technology and training. Our people. Sir Goldsmith raised an eyebrow. You're asking us to build our own competition? No, Traoré corrected him gently. Your future partner. We could even pursue joint ventures down the line. After a pause, Sir Goldsmith reached across the table and extended his hand. Then we have a deal. Traoré smiled and shook it firmly. The charges against Mr. Thornton and Mr. Leclerc will be withdrawn, but they will not be permitted to return to Burkina Faso in any professional capacity. Reynolds exhaled heavily in relief. And the media leaks? That chapter is closed, said Traoré, but if this agreement is violated, rest assured there's more where that came from. 2 weeks later, a grand ceremony took place. At the Esakan gold mine, flags of Burkina Faso and Global Gold fluttered together in the wind. President Ibrahim Traoré and Sir James Goldsmith jointly lifted a ceremonial gold bar to mark the signing of the new agreement. Today, Traoré declared, "We begin a new chapter not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. Our land is abundant, our people are strong, and the time has come for equitable partnerships." Sir Goldsmith followed with brief remarks. "Over 60 years, I've witnessed massive change. Sometimes, to endure, you must evolve. This agreement is the start of a new relationship, one built on fairness and respect between Global Gold and Burkina Faso." Villagers, miners, and international journalists gathered for the historic event. Among them was Richard Thornton. He no longer worked for Global Gold, but Traoré had personally invited him. After the ceremony, Thornton approached the president. "Why did you invite me?" he asked quietly. "Because," Traoré replied, "you're part of this transformation." Thornton gave a faint smile. "Funny enough, I've already received some new offers. I'm thinking about what's next. I'm planning to launch a consultancy firm," Thornton said, "to transform how mining businesses operate across Africa. I believe I have insights worth sharing." Traoré nodded approvingly. "That's a worthwhile idea. Perhaps someday you might advise our own national mining company here in Burkina Faso." "Maybe," Thornton replied thoughtfully. "This entire journey has changed me. For most of my career, I focused solely on figures and profits, never on the communities behind those numbers." "It's never too late to start doing the right thing," said Traoré. The two men exchanged a firm handshake and parted. Half a year later, The Economist magazine ran a front-page feature titled "Africa's Mining Revolution." The article detailed how the groundbreaking deal between Burkina Faso and Global Gold had inspired a wave of reforms across the continent. Ghana, Mali, Niger, and Tanzania had entered talks to renegotiate their mining agreements. Global mining corporations were scrambling to adjust to the evolving landscape. Global Gold's stock had rebounded after its initial fall. The company unveiled a fresh branding campaign focused on sustainable mining practices. In numerous media appearances, Sir James Goldsmith expressed pride in Global Gold's role as a partner in Africa's progress. In Burkina Faso, the Traoré government had started channeling new revenues from the gold sector into essential public services. Villages around the Esakan mine gained access to clean water, new schools opened, and health clinics were constructed. Meanwhile, the country's national mining company had begun training programs for aspiring engineers and skilled workers. Inside his presidential office in Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré sat behind his desk, staring at The Economist's latest cover. His own face appeared beneath the headline, "Africa's New Generation Leader." He smiled briefly and placed the magazine aside. A knock on the door followed. "Mr. President," said his assistant, "Nigeria's new leader is on the line. He'd like to speak with you about oil contracts." "Put him through," Traoré said, picking up the receiver with steady confidence. "I believe I can be of help." The fight to reclaim Africa's natural wealth was only beginning, and Burkina Faso's young president was prepared to lead the charge. Thousands of miles away, in London, Richard Thornton stood gazing at the River Thames from his new office window. On his desk sat a stack of business cards bearing the name Fair Mining Consultancy Services. A soft ping from his phone drew his attention. It was an email from President Traoré's office. They were extending an official offer, a consultancy position with the Burkina Faso National Mining Company. Thornton smiled and typed back, "I accept." Sometimes a threat from the most unexpected source becomes a turning point. In Thornton's case, it had transformed not just his career but his entire sense of purpose. He no longer served only shareholders. Now he answered to a higher standard, one of conscience, equity, and responsibility to the communities affected. By his work, he slipped the phone into his pocket and began getting ready for his journey back to Ouagadougou. Africa's gold would finally benefit its people, and he was proud to contribute. Outside the window, he noticed the silhouette of Global Gold's skyscraper in the London skyline. Its gleaming facade now bore a new slogan just beneath the company's name: sustainable mining, fair partnerships. Change had arrived, even if slowly.